Hi friends, in the last couple of videos we have comprehensively reviewed the previous three codes, which were Code on Wages, Code on Industrial Relations and Code on Social Security. Today we are going to look at one of the mammoth codes, which is the Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. This code almost replaces 13 previous acts and consolidates them into one single act. The main acts which this code kind of consolidates are the Factories Act, the Contract Labor Act, the Mines Act, the Plantation Labor Act, the Building and Other Construction Workers Conditions of Service Act, the Dock Workers Act, the Working Journalist Act, the Sales Promotion Employees Act, the Motor Transport Working Employees Act, and so on. So altogether 13 acts are consolidated into a single code. If you look at this code, I would particularly say that it is most revolutionary and most employer and employee friendly, wherein it tries to balance it out, the provisions related to those of favoring the employees and those related to the employers. Erstwhile provisions of Factories Act or Contract Labor Act with couple of acts which were very stringent. I think this Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020 tries to liberalize a bit. It tries to encourage the safety, health and welfare of the employees, and also on many important provisions it makes a marked departure from the previous Factories Act or the Contract Labor Act. Let's review each of the provisions in detail. In terms of the applicability of this code, it tries to cover all establishments, not just factories, but all other establishment in its fold. So the applicability or the scope of this act is quite wider than probably the earlier Factories Act was. Now we all know that under Factories Act, the definition of factory was wherein 10 or more workers are employed with the use of power, where a manufacturing process is carried on with the use of power, or 20 or more workers are employed in a manufacturing process without aid of power. Now this definition is undergoing a change, wherein the limit has been increased from 10 to 20 in case of those factories or factories using power for their manufacturing process, and in case of those factories not using power in the manufacturing process, it code liberalizes it from 20 to 40. So this is the first change wherein the threshold limit for consideration of the factory has been increased from 10 to 20 in case of power and 20 to 40 in case of without power. The second important provision, I think this provision comes within the definition, which is an important definition under section 2p of this new code. This resembles the erstwhile section 10 of the Contract Labor Act. Now as you know, the Contract Labor Act had a provision that the contract labor were prohibited to be engaged in certain activities as where either the activity was perennial in nature, or whether it was incidental, or whether it is sufficient to employ regular workers. Now this was the definition where the contract labor either could or could not be employed, and the government had the powers to give a notification prohibiting the employment of contract labor in certain activities by considering the perennial nature, the whether it is incidental or not, and so on and so forth. Now in some of the states, especially Andhra Pradesh, to name a few, there was always a definition of core and non-core activities, and the contract labor was permitted to be engaged in the non-core activities. I think the Central Act now, the new code, tries to take a reference to that, and it defines the core activities of the establishment, and it says that the contract labor cannot be employed in the core activity of the establishment, and it lists on to the various activities like canteen, housekeeping, security services, transport services, occupational health center, and many other such services where they are incidental to the core activity of the establishment. Now this is primarily taken from the AP definition of the Contract Labour Act. However, one of the most striking and important provisions which this code tries to bring about is that it also defines that any work which a sudden increase in work will not be deemed to be the core activity of the establishment, and therefore to manage any sudden surge in the demand or surge in the production, you can always employ contract labor, because the definition of the core activity of the establishment doesn't include any sudden or intermittent increase in the workload. Now this has a lot of bearing for all of us. Now whenever the work increases, the tendency was to either recruit more people or deploy, let's say in some cases, badli workers, or provide overtime to the workers to cover up. But however, this act now provides explicitly for engaging contract labor in places where there is a sudden increase in the core activity of the establishment. Now this is quite revolutionary, as you would agree, because hitherto the core activity was something to be employed or engaged by the regular workmen, and the non-core activities are to be engaged by the contract labor. But any sudden increase in the core activity can be managed through contract labor, and then there is an enabling definition under section 2P. Similarly, in the Factories Act, we always hear or we always see a term called ordinarily employed. Now normally there is no definition as to what is ordinarily employed. Normally when the factory inspector comes to the factory, he would ask for the shift strength of last 3 shifts. Now thereby trying to calculate what is the average number of employees which are ordinarily employed. Now the Act for the first time in section 2ZV defines what is ordinarily employed. It takes a definition that the total man days worked in the preceding 12 months divided by the number of working days excluding the leaves and the holidays. So what is ordinarily employed also has been defined, which was earlier missed. So these are 3 startling changes. One is in terms of the definition of the factory, one is in terms of defining what is the core activity of the establishment, and third is defining the what is called as the ordinarily employed in a factory. Section 8 of the code puts on certain obligations on the parts of designees, architects, or the manufacturers of various articles or substances or equipment which are used in factories or establishment to take into consideration the safety aspects, the hazards which the equipment or the substance would give to the workers employed in a factory, and tries to obligate them to ensure that whatever they design or manufacture for the use in a factory, especially the equipments and various other substances which we probably use in the manufacturing process or for the manufacturing process, to be free of any defects or those which do not possess any health and safety risk to the employees. Now this is one of the welcome provisions, because it not just obligates or mandates the occupier or manager to be concerned about the safety and welfare of the employees, but it also obligates the designers, the importers, the manufacturers of various articles, substances and various equipments which are being used in a factory, so that the overall safety culture is embedded right from the design stage itself. This is one of the welcome change. Also in the section 9, it also obligates the architects also to design the buildings or structures by duly taking the safety consideration into reckoning. Similarly, under section 10, the notice of accident remains as it was in earlier case. However, there is a clear provision that any notice, when a notice is given for an accident or a dangerous occurrence, the concerned department, which is obviously the chief inspector or any other government department, has to inquire into the matter within 2 months, I think earlier it was left open because when you submitted a Form 12 or a Form 18 notifying an accident, there was no time frame to close the investigation or close the process, but now it obligates that within 2 months the inquiry has to be completed. So I think this is the second important provision related to the notification of accident. Now, I think one of the major provisions which will ease lot of our lives and again bring the safety culture among the workers and the employees is section 13 of the Act. Now previously, if you compare, you can probably compare it with section 111 of the Factories Act, where it says about the obligation of workers. Normally, the workers had an obligation not to interfere into any of the safety device or any equipment which was provided to secure the health, safety and welfare, and not to do anything which would jeopardize their and others' working conditions or others' health and safety. Now these are broadly the two to three provisions which were there in the section 111 of the erstwhile Factories Act. Now section 13 of the new code actually widens the scope to a larger extent, wherein it says that no person shall do any act which would put him or his co-workers into risk. That is, it makes as a duty of a worker or a duty of an employee to not to do such things which would probably put him and his co-workers under risk. That is one provision. And the second provision which is of great importance is, normally whenever there are certain unsafe conditions or unsafe acts, now it is always the management who tries to encourage the workers or encourage the employees to report. Now under section 13, an obligation is cast on the workers to report any unsafe condition or unsafe act so that it can be rectified. So I think it tries to put the responsibility of safety of employees and workers on not just the occupier or the manager, but it also tries to distribute it, or I would call out that it tries to include the workers and employees by specifying certain duties which they need to undertake for health, safety and welfare, especially in light of section 13, which is a stark difference from erstwhile section 111 of the Factories Act. In addition, section 13 also calls upon the workers and employees to cooperate with management to implement the various obligations under this code. So not just that it is trying to tell them that you need to report the near misses and unsafe conditions and unsafe acts, not just you need not do anything which endangers your life, but it also has an explicit obligation or a duty on an employee to cooperate with management to implement various provisions under the code. Now this is quite revolutionary from an earlier practice. As regards the provisions of welfare under section 24, now nothing changes drastically in terms of what are the various facilities, except that earlier there was no mention of providing lockers for keeping the outside clothes. Now the Act specifically mentions about lockers to be provided separately for male and female workers to store their outside clothes. That is one thing which is being included. In addition, lot of changes are being brought about in terms of the threshold limit required for certain facilities. For example, earlier, in order to have a canteen mandatorily, the threshold limit was 250 workers. That means if a factory had 250 workers, you need to mandatorily have a canteen. Now that threshold limit is being reduced from 250 to 100 as in regard to canteen. As in regard to shelter room or a lunch room or a rest room, it is reduced from 150 to 50. As regards the provision of welfare officer, where earlier only those factories where the total workers ordinarily employed exceeded 500 or more need to have a welfare officer. I think now that has been reduced from 500 to 250. Nothing much changes as regards the welfare. The other provisions continues, except that the details of the provisions in terms of how they look like has not been given, and it is said that this will be part of the notification or the rules which the government would make. As regards the working hours provision corresponding to chapter 6 of Erstwhile Factories Act. Now, Erstwhile Factories Act had two important sections. One was section 51, which prescribed that no worker shall be allowed to work for more than 48 hours, and section 54, which used to say that no worker shall be allowed to work for more than 9 hours in a day. And section 59 said that when workers work for either more than 9 hours a day or more than 48 hours, overtime has to be paid. Now, there was a catch. Once a worker is not allowed to work for more than 9 hours in a day, and there is an overall 48-hour cap in a week, how does it work? Now, typically we all have taken common understanding that work would normally mean excluding the breaks or excluding the lunch time. That's how, even if, let's say, in a factory a person is staying for more than 8 hours, we would not pay OT by excluding the hours which he has spent on the rest breaks or the lunch breaks. Now, in order to avoid all this confusion, straight away the Act says that no person shall be allowed to work for more than 8 hours in a day. That means the rest hours and spread hours, everything, it's keeping it outside the 8 hours. The intervals and the rest interval or the lunch break or the canteen breaks are beyond the 8 hours. That is one important change. And second thing is the provisions related to spread over or the overall weekly hours or the daily limits are now being kept as part of a notification by government. So there is nothing specified in section 25 as to what would be the spread over, what would be the time frame after which a break has to be given. Such provisions which were there under section 51 to 55 are no longer specified in the Act, but they will be part of the notification. Another important provision related to working hours, especially those related to the motor vehicle workers or the drivers in the factory. Now, we all know driving or the drivers work is such that morning once they report to the duty and they will probably drive for some time and then they are either idle. But then always we have paid overtime, or because there was a lack of clarity as what would constitute work, or because the driver was already available in the company and if in case we could not use them, will he still be deemed to have been worked? Now, here the Act quite nicely defines three important things as regard to motor vehicle workers or the drivers in the factory. First, it says is running time. When the driver is actually running the vehicle, that's one type of work it kind of classifies. Second thing is doing subsidiary work. That means, let's say he's cleaning the vehicle or he's trying to write some log books and stuff like that. That's the second part of his work. So only the first two parts related to the running of the vehicle and any subsidiary work related to the vehicle are counted for his daily work hours. The waiting time, if it is more than 15 minutes, is excluded from the working hours definition. That means, in case the waiting time is up to 15 minutes, it would be part of the working hours. But if it is more than 15 hours, when you are computing his overall working hours in a day for arriving at an overtime or for arriving at the working hours, you can exclude the waiting period or when the driver is idle waiting for the job and the period in excess of 15 minutes can be ignored. I think this is one provision especially related to the motor vehicles and the drivers. It is very handy because you don't end up paying overtime just from the start time and the end time. Section 27 of the Act deals with the overtime. Nothing much changes. The overtime, in case the worker works for more than 8 hours, he needs to be paid overtime. But there were always certain conditions which were prescribed in section 64 and 65, where there are certain exemptions in terms of the quarterly hours of overtime which the government could permit under section 64 and section 65, which was 50 and 75. Many state governments have over the years progressively relaxed the overtime hours. So, however, the government has not prescribed any limit in the Act as to say, and it has completely left it the notification or a rules. So that is one welcome change. And again, the overtime cost would probably increase because of the definition of the wages, which as we have been discussing right from the code of wages to social security, in all the acts, even in the new act, the same definition of the wages continues. In some establishments, the overtime is being paid on basic plus DA, but now with the overall definition of 50% of the CTC being the wages, the overtime cost would definitely increase in the new scheme of things. One of the major changes, friends, is also occurring in the annual leave with wages provisions, the erstwhile section 79 of the Factories Act. Now, in the new act, the eligibility for leave is being reduced from 240 working days to 180. As you know, any worker who worked for 240 days in a previous calendar year was entitled for leave with wages at the rate of 1 for 20 in the subsequent calendar year. Now, the eligibility condition is being reduced from 240 days to 180 days. So, any worker who works for 180 days in a factory is now eligible for leave with wages under section 32. Similarly, the overall carry forward of EL still remains the same. It's up for 30 days. However, under section 32 subsection 8, for the first time, leave encashment is being introduced. Now, when I say leave encashment is being introduced, any carry forward leave in excess of 30 has to be mandatorily encashed at the end of the calendar year. Now, some companies were doing it as a matter of practice or a policy, but there are many companies which were not doing during the working life of an employee and paying only at the time of severance. And there were some companies which came to my notice where the practice of leave encashment was at the rate of gross wages at the time of separation, but during the course of the employment, the encashment was at the rate of basic plus DA because the act never specified leave encashment. So it was more a discretionary and a policy driven affair in many companies, and different standards or different approaches were taken. So under first time, section 32(8) clearly brings a leave encashment concept. It was not there earlier in the Factories Act. Factories Act only talked about encashment of leave only at the time of separation. So that has been included. Another quite encouraging and revolutionary provision, especially which will probably kind of champion the diversity and inclusion agenda of all the companies. It's a welcome provision, is under section 43, wherein it allows, this is related to the employment of women in factories. As you would know, the erstwhile section 66(1)(b) had a clear bar on employment of women in factories before 6 a.m. and after 7 p.m. Now, this was a clear bar, but there are many high courts, to start with the Kerala High Court, which has struck down the provision as against the constitution, and even the Andhra Pradesh High Court and many high courts in the country have struck down section 66(1)(b) of the Factories Act, saying that it kind of is discriminatory and against the women because it prohibits or restricts their participation in the workforce, and it also kind of puts on some restrictions in the overall employment of women, because you can only employ them either during a general shift or maximum during a shift, because the other shift, the time would probably overlap with that provided in the act. So for the first time under section 43, it has been explicitly provided that a woman can be employed in a factory or an establishment before 6 a.m. or after 7 p.m. with her consent. So in case you have a consent of the woman, you can employ them in any of the shifts, not just the AR general shift, in all the 3 shifts. However, with certain safety precautions which the government would notify. So obviously this could include in terms of a door-to-door drop, or it could include in terms of probably providing some sort of a welfare facilities for the woman round the clock, because she is now coming to the factory not just during a general shift when facilities like crèche and all can be available, but all other facilities. We don't know what are the provisions which the government would bring, but definitely a welcome change, something which would go along with our diversity and inclusion agenda, and something which would increase the women in shop floor, which is today a cause of concern for many establishments because there are certain restrictions which the Act itself has imposed. As regards the provisions of the Contract Labour Act, again they have been liberalized to the sense that earlier a contractor or an establishment who were employing 20 or more workers, contract labor, were required to take a registration or a license as the case may be. Now in some states like Andhra Pradesh, the limit was 5, and in some states like West Bengal it was also 3. So it was a limit which was varying from state to state, but 20 was the threshold which was there in the Central CLRA Act of 1970. Now that limit under section 45 has been enhanced to 50 contract labor. So in case you are employing up to 50 contract labor, either as a principal employer or as a contractor, no license is required. Now another important provision which is under section 53 of the Act. Now you would know that even the Contract Labour Act envisages certain facilities related to health and safety and welfare, like providing the drinking water or the cool water, or in terms of the canteen and restrooms and other facilities. Now the first time the Act actually equalizes everybody in a sense that all the provisions related to health, safety and welfare, especially those under section 23 and 24, are to be explicitly provided by the principal employer only. So it's not the obligation of the contractor to provide the facilities, and in the absence of the contractor, the erstwhile Act kind of enjoined the principal employer to provide. However, in the new code, directly the responsibility is cast on the principal employer to provide the health and welfare facilities under section 53. As regards 57, as I told you, it's a revolutionary provision. It prohibits the employment of contract labor in core activity except when there is a sudden increase in the work or the work is intermittent in nature, and in order to meet that sudden demand increase or sudden increase in the work, you can employ the contract laborers even in the core activity. This has been a definition in section 2P and an enabling provision under section 57. So I think these three are quite revolutionary provisions as regards contract labor and very employer friendly or business friendly in order to provide certain, in terms of increasing the threshold, also in terms of allowing to employ contract labor in core activity, especially when there are sudden production spikes or the surge in the market demand kind of situation. However, it kind of balances when it says that all the welfare provisions are to be provided by the principal employer, and not just we can deflect the responsibility to the contractor and say that it's the responsibility of contractor. No, the Act clearly mentions that it's the responsibility of the principal employer. Under section 85 of the Act, as regards the hazardous process, you would know that in case of hazardous process there are certain obligations to the occupier in terms of the safety, health and welfare of the people working in a hazardous process industry. Now the same continues, nothing changes. However, the medical examination of people working in the hazardous process was earlier to be done once in 6 months. Now and this was in the rules. In some states it was once in 6 months, in some states it was continued to be in once in 12 years, but now the Act standardizes it as once in 12 months. That is, every worker who is working in a hazardous process has to be mandatorily undergone a medical examination before taking up the job, and each year as part of the annual medical examination. This is under section 85. Now under section 103, where a death or a serious bodily injury occurs to any worker or an employee in a factory or an establishment, the occupier or the manager will be punished under the provisions of this code, and the similar provisions were there earlier. What is different is, in case of death, the fine is up to 5 lakhs, which is quite substantially increased, and in case of serious bodily injury it is 2 lakhs. However, there is a bit of a provision which is pro workers, where it says that when the court levies the fine of 5 lakhs, 50% shall be provided. Up to 50% the court can direct to be provided to the legal heirs of the person who has died as a result of accident in a factory. Now this is in addition to whatever the benefits he would get under the other codes, which is the social security code, or whatever the other benefits which the worker is entitled. So I think the fine which the employer pays for an accident up to 50% can be given to the legal heirs of the victim under section 103. Now here is some good news for occupiers and managers. Now next two provisions are very critical for them. Now the reason I say this is the erstwhile section 92 of the Factories Act, which was about the offences by company, it always put the responsibility squarely on occupier and manager, and there was always a criminal offence and it was being tried under court. Now it so happens, and this is our practical experience, that whether the occupier who normally is the board of director in many of the companies, or a manager who is a plant head kind of a person, probably he is not somebody on the ground on a day-to-day basis. However, when something wrong happens, it is the occupier and the manager who are tried under section 92 of the Factories Act. Now there is a very good provision, I will say is a liberalizing provision under section 108, which says that in case the occupier or manager has put forth various systems, processes, devices, etc. to secure the health and safety of the workers, and despite that a particular accident or injury has happened due to the negligence of any of the person working in the factory or establishment, he can try the other person as the offender and not the occupier or the manager. Now this definitely, practically speaking, this is a very good provision, because though the occupier or manager put forth certain policies and certain governance mechanisms to ensure the health, safety and welfare of the workers, it is the people who are working on the ground who tend to violate it, or who tend to take certain shortcuts, or probably are negligent to the provisions. However, under section 108, it's a very powerful provision where it kind of relieves the occupier and manager, but it also tightens the responsibility of safety onto everybody who is working in the factory, because if any accident or any injury happens, it is not just the occupier or the manager who can be punished, but they can put the blame squarely on the person who was in charge of that activity, or that whose negligence has resulted into that accident. I think this is a welcome provision under section 108. Similarly, under section 109, in case where a case is put by the Factories Act under section 92, the occupier or the manager always had to prove that we have done enough in securing the health and safety in order to put forth various systems and processes, and still the accident has happened. Now it nowhere mentioned that in case adequate due diligence or adequate care has been taken by the occupier or the manager, they can probably be out of the liability. Under section 109, a specific provision is there where it says that in case the occupier or manager can convince that all the necessary due diligence, all the care has been taken in order to secure the health and safety and welfare of the workers, and still a particular accident or an injury has happened, they can probably be let off from the prosecution or from the penal provisions under the Act. So definitely section 108 and 109 are something which will not just put the liability of safety and health on the occupier or the manager, but it tries to put it on the every member of the management staff, or even the workers or supervisors, or every cadre of people, so that they are responsible to the safety and welfare, not just the occupier or the manager, and even the penal provisions can be directed towards them and not just the occupier or the manager. So friends, these are the provisions of the new Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. As I explained, these provisions are very different from the erstwhile Factories Act or a Contract Labor Act or any of the 13 legislations it tries to consolidate. These are very employer friendly or business friendly, I would call out. It kind of liberalizes many of the aspects which were there in the earlier enactments and tries to create a climate which is more conducive to business and takes into consideration a lot of operational and day-to-day problems which factory managements face, and it tries to also bring in the safety and safety culture by not just mandating the occupier or manager to be responsible for safety, but it tries to cast the responsibility of health, safety and welfare on everybody, right from the designer of an equipment to somebody who's actually an architect designing the project or a factory or a plant, or to an employer, manager, a supervisor, to a worker who actually has a responsibility towards his fellow workers as well as his own self in terms of reporting various aspects related to the near misses and stuff like that. It also tries to liberalize certain provision related to the canteens and the welfare officers and some of the welfare provisions. It also tries to liberalize the entitlement for the leave with wages and provisions related to that. So overall, a very comprehensive and a very business friendly piece of legislation which was much awaited in the country, because factories were operating in a lot of cumbersome procedures and cumbersome legislations. Now it has liberalized to a larger extent, I would call, considering the way the Indian legislation in Indian pulls and pressures and political classes works. It's a welcome piece of legislation, friends, and I hope that you have liked the explanation of the various provisions. Do like and share this particular video among your friends. As I always keep on telling, this is nothing but a knowledge sharing session, and now that all the 4 codes have been explained, I'm sure you would gain knowledge and these codes will be useful in your day-to-day operations. Thank you very much.